Okay, so I'm going to show you how to make the Yule log at home. Make sure you get dressed up in a Christmas jumper or something Christmassy, and the first thing you need to do is to get your oven on, either on a gas mark 6 if you've got a gas oven, if you're working on electric about 180, 190. Next thing we're going to do then is to prepare the tin. You'll need a Swiss roll tin, which is a flat tin which has some sides on it. And the first thing you need is a piece of greaseproof paper which is just cut slightly bigger than the size of the tin. First thing I'm going to do is just put a little bit of oil on. You could use a little bit of butter and rub it on with some greaseproof paper. I'm just going to use some oil and then move it around, brush up the sides. Next then we're going to place paper over the tin, and then to make the edges really neat, basically if I did it like this and push it into the corners, it would all scrunch up. Can you see? So what we're going to do is just snip into the corner to the bottom of the tin, and now when we press it in, they're going to overlap and it's going to end up nice and neat. So continue doing that now with the other 3 sides, and that is your tin prepared. Now we're going to start on the whisked sponge. So we're going to start off with 85 grams of sugar in preferably a glass or a metal bowl, but it doesn't matter desperately if you don't have one. I just find that it works better if you do. So 3 eggs go in, and just check you haven't got any shell going in there, and it's caster sugar that we're wanting to use. Then we're going to use an electric whisk, preferably if you've got one, to whisk all of this mixture together, and it will froth up and go really thick. Now, if you have got a glass or metal bowl, what you can do is to pop that over some simmering water. So just a really small amount of water in the bottom of a pan. I brought this up to simmer previously, so I'll just pop it back on for a few moments. Bring that back up to a simmer, and that's just going to heat the mixture through very gently whilst we whisk. And I'm going to whisk it for about 30 seconds on the heat. Okay, so I've been whisking this on the very gently simmering water now for about 1 minute. Being really careful to make sure you don't let the cable from the whisk go anywhere near the flame. I'm going to take this off of the flame now, turn the heat off, and I'm going to carry on whisking this for another 2 minutes. So the chill's just been slightly taken off the eggs, and it allows the sugar to dissolve within the egg a bit more. So I'm going to whisk this for another 2 minutes, and then we'll take another look. Okay, so I've been mixing this now for about 2 minutes, making sure I move the whisk around so I'm whisking all of the mixture. To check to see if it's done, I'm going to lift the beaters out. I'm just going to make sure that the mixture leaves a trail. It doesn't just pour straight off. It's got lots of air in it. It's nice and thick and frothy like double cream. Once it looks like that, let's get all the mixture off the beaters and take the beaters out. Next, we're ready to add our dry ingredients. Now, we've just spent quite a lot of time mixing air into this. What we don't want to do is go and knock all of the air straight back out of it. So I've got 60 grams of plain flour, half a teaspoon of baking powder, which is a bit of a raising agent, and 2 tablespoons of cocoa. If you haven't got any baking powder, just use self-raising flour. It's pretty much the same. We're going to add about half of those dry ingredients to start off with, and then we're going to use a sort of a cutting and folding figure of 8 to try and fold those dry ingredients in. We want the flour and the cocoa to disappear, but we don't go back in with the whisk, because if we do that, we're going to knock all of the air out and it'll go all flat again. Once the first lot of dry ingredients have all mixed in, we're going to add the second half of the dry ingredients. Notice I'm just passing it through a sieve. Can you see there are quite a few little hard lumps, especially with the cocoa and the baking powder. When it dries out, it go a bit lumpy, so press all that through. Don't want those lumps in your sponge. And then fold this in until all of the dry ingredients have disappeared. All of the dry mixture is mixed in now with the beaten egg and sugar. So we're going to transfer this now into our tin. So just scrape all the mixture out. Hopefully you've still got some air left in the mixture. And then You'll need to just use the back of your spoon to tease it into the corners of the tin. It's not a sponge that will spread easily by itself, so you'll need to do that. Try not to mess about with it too much though, because you will knock the air out of the mixture. And once you've got it nice and even, that's going to go into the oven for 10 minutes. It's a really quick bake on this one. So we'll transfer that over to a preheated oven. I've got it on a gas mark 6. Set the timer for 10 minutes. And then we'll have a look at that in 10 minutes. Okay, whilst the sponge is in the oven, I'm going to make the buttercream. So in here I've got 75 grams of a soft spread. It's not reduced fat or anything. It's best for baking that is the full fat amount, which is usually about 70 to 80%. You could use a block or butter, but it is going to mix in better if it is a softer spread. If you've got hard butter, just leave it out the fridge for a couple of hours. What we're going to do now is to mix in our icing sugar. So I've got 75 grams of butter, 100 grams of icing sugar and 50 grams of cocoa. And we're going to add a little bit at a time. If we try and put too much in one go, we're going to end up with a bit of a snowstorm and the kitchen's going to be a bit of a mess. You can do this with a wooden spoon, but if you've got a whisk, you can use it. So I'm just going to whisk in until all the dry ingredients have disappeared, and then go in with a little bit more. Keep going until you've managed to incorporate all of the dry ingredients in with the butter. I've mixed in all of the dry ingredients now. I am going to just add a capful of vanilla extract. If your mixture at this point is particularly dry, you could consider adding a tablespoon or so of milk or water, just until you get the right consistency. You'll need to make sure that it's of a spreadable consistency, not too thick but not too wet either, because we don't want it to slide off the edge of the Yule log. Okay, once that's done, we're just going to pop it to one side. So the 10-minute timer's gone off. I'm going to have a look at the sponge quickly now. Right, so I can see that if I shake it, it's not wobbling. If I touch it, it bounces back. It's quite springy. It's not burnt. I'm pretty confident that that is now cooked. So what I'm going to need to do is to take another piece of greaseproof paper and lay it out on the table. Make sure you've got plenty of space. Take some icing sugar and sprinkle some icing sugar over the paper. That's going to stop the sponge from sticking to the paper. Then you need to bring over your sponge. Use the oven gloves because it will still be hot. Bring the sponge over to the paper, and then you're going to turn it out like so. It's a really fragile little sponge, so it tears really easily. So just untuck the paper and then really carefully loosen it from the edges and carefully peel it away slowly. Try not to rip any of the sponge. If it starts to rip, just come at it from a different angle. Okay, there we go. So we'll just get rid of that wrapper. Now we need to decide which way we are going to roll it and what we're going to put on the inside. If you're going to use jam or chocolate spread, it's fine to put that in while the sponge is still hot. So that's what I'm going to do. If you're going to put fresh cream or anything on the inside, you have to do that on a cold sponge. Now, my kids have eaten all of the chocolate spread, so I'm going to use some marmalade. So I'm going to pop, that's a bit of a big blob, that. Let's try and spread it out a bit. I thought chocolate and orange might work quite well. It's quite a chunky marmalade, so be a few lumps. And while the sponge is still quite hot, I'm just going to attempt to spread that out evenly. You can use jam, you can use chocolate spread if you want to, and then we'll roll it up once we've spread it all out. So my camera woman's just told me that I incorrectly said that I was putting icing sugar on the paper. It's caster sugar, sorry about that. Right, so we're going to need to get a good view on this, so I'll turn to face you. I'm going to roll my sponge this way. That means that my Yule log will be this long. If I were to roll it this way, my Yule log's only going to be quite short. So you'll notice I've spread out all of the marmalade. I'm going to make sure I get the first fold really tucked under, and then I'm going to use the paper to pull that towards me, not squashing it, but making sure it's rolling and not just folding in half. Then we're going to stop rolling. We're just going to move it back. We're going to stop rolling and make sure that the fold is at the bottom. So I'm going to keep that wrapped around it to keep it in its shape, and drape a tea towel over it just to weigh it down a bit. And I'm just going to leave that for about 10 minutes to cool down, and it should set in that shape. So I've waited for the sponge now to get completely cold so we can remove the tea towel. If you are going to be adding any whipped cream or anything on the inside now, you'll need to open it back up. So when you would have rolled it up, you'd want to keep the paper, rolled it up with the paper inside of it so it doesn't stick. Okay, so I'd already moved on to the next step, and then we realised that the camera had stopped filming. But what I've basically done is cut at an angle along here, part of the log off, and then I've put some of my butter icing just on the inside. I'm going to pop this up onto my plate that I'm going to display it on, and then I'm going to pop the branch onto the side. And what we're then going to do is just take either a plastic spatula or just the back of a spoon, and really carefully spread all of the chocolate buttercream along the top and the sides until it's fully covered. Once you've roughly covered it all in the chocolate buttercream, then you can get a fork, and we're just going to run the fork over it, try and make some little patterns so it looks like the bark on a tree, and do a swirl on the ends if you wish. Doesn't have to be perfect, it looks quite nice if it's a bit rugged. There we go. And then if you want to, you can decorate the top with a little bit of icing sugar, which can look a bit like snow, so just a little bit sprinkled over there, like that, and finish it off with your favourite family Christmas decoration, Yule log.